morning and welcome to The Point. It is Friday, July 16th, 2021. Thank you to those of you joining us on the GBN Grenada Broadcasting Network's Facebook page, the Grenada Broadcasting Network's YouTube channel, the website www.gbn.gd, GBN TV channel 7, 11 and 20. Good morning to the listeners of Classic 105.5, 105.9 and those of you joining us on Party Grenada and Go to Fet Facebook pages. It is a pleasure to have you joining us for To The Point this morning. This morning, my virtual guest is a former director of tourism, Mr. William Joseph, and we'll look at a general topic. Recovery of Grenada's tourism industry post-COVID-19, or I shouldn't say post, no, during the COVID-19 pandemic. Good morning and welcome, Mr. Joseph. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much. It's always good to be with you. Good morning to your viewers.
Always a pleasure.
And listeners, of course.
Yes. This morning, recovery of tourism. That's the general idea that I have in the back of my head. And the discussion this morning really was propelled with the announcement this week from Minister of Health, Nicholas Steele, of the revised entry protocols, and effective end of this month, Grenada would only be welcoming fully vaccinated visitors into the island. And that spurred some questions in my mind as to what this would mean for Grenada's tourism product, if it would have any impact and what kind of impact it would have. So let's start there. With this announcement that only fully vaccinated visitors can come into Grenada, how do you think this can affect Grenada's tourism product? Would it boost or would it hurt what we are already offering in a COVID-19 health pandemic?
Yes, and thank you so much. And if you don't mind, let me just take a minute to set the table from my perspective.
Sure.
In a general sense, I think the tourism is such an important issue that a lot of us ought to be discussing it, because it has become very central to the economic and social life of Grenadians. What are we talking about? We're talking about the biggest contributor to the national economy. And you break that down and you're talking about employment, you're talking about investment in the sector, you're talking about taxation revenues, you're talking about foreign exchange earnings and so on. So if you imagine that, for example, in 2019, which would be our base year in the discussions we're going to have, we welcome in excess of 500,000 visitors to Grenada, 5 times our population size. Then you could understand the significance of that. And you reckon with the fact that the earnings, as indicated by the World Bank, for that year were put in excess of $548 million US dollars. So we are talking about an industry that touches virtually every life in Grenada, wherever you are. There is no tongue and country issue regarding tourism. It's very, very significant and important that we carry that perspective. So having raised that, let me just say that my intention is to be as constructive as possible to bring that kind of spirit to our discussions. I don't intend to be critical in one way or the other, but I do think that there are cases where we ought to look objectively at what is happening or not happening and try to make some sensible comments on those matters. So that's how I choose to set the table, and I thank you for that. So let me turn now to your question. Your first
Right.
question. Right? The vaccination requirement. Bottom line is that I think it's really we have no choice. It is the most prudent thing that we can do. The protection, remember, vaccination is not a safeguard, it's not a guarantee. It is a standard of minimization. In other words, you say you vaccinate people, then you significantly minimize the prospect or the possibility or potential of the COVID virus affecting significant numbers of your population. So there's that. Now, before this pandemic, and in my idea, and I presume continuing thereafter, when we talk to travel agents and tour operators and so on, we used to make a boast about the public health status of Grenada, that we didn't have contagious diseases and so on. The place is healthy. It's one of the advantages that we took to the marketplace. In this pandemic context, I am not sure that we could go with that. And in fact, it would not be prudent to rely on the status up to this point of very minimal levels of presence of the virus, and to take comfort from that simply because the thing could come at any point through any routes. And as we reopen the industry and accept tourists in, it is more than likely that there could be slippage in the system that in fact might allow the thing to come upon us again. No. So there's a kind of ironic situation going on, because while we say everybody wishing to come to Grenada must have been 100% vaccinated, and I agree with that, the question is, what is happening on the receiving side? I saw something recently that said only 15% of us here in Grenada have been vaccinated. So what does it say? It says that we are asking people to come into in an environment where 8 in 10 people, 9 in 10 people are not vaccinated. So you see, the risk environment is present. It's right there. Either way, either they give it to us or we give it to them. In any case, if we're giving it, it means that we have it. If we get it, it means that we're going to have to deal with it. So anyhow you look at it, it is a difficult situation. But I do agree with the authorities that that standard requirement ought to be imposed. And I think the industry I don't expect that they would have any difficulty with that at all.
Even if the requirement for allowing only fully vaccinated people into the island, even if that may be what is necessary, can Grenada really afford to put such a requirement in place? And I'm not just talking dollars and cents, I'm talking in all sense when it comes to the tourism industry. Can Grenada afford to do that in the hopes of bouncing back and building back our tourism product?
Yeah. Well, we don't have a choice. We really don't have a choice, right? The recovery is going to require a whole lot of other actions, policy decisions and so on, other actions, other adjustments and so on. And we will discuss that later. But consider this. You raise the question of affordability. Can we afford, and what is how it's going to impact us and so on? But let us assume, for example, that we allow in a small cruise ship to bring in 100 passengers here twice a month, none of whom had been vaccinated. And you come into a population where 8 in 10 of us have not been vaccinated. I tell you, in 3 months' time, 30% of our population would have the problem, the virus. So you see what is at risk, right? You earn $300,000 and you have 30,000 Grenadians sick with the virus. So I'm happy that you grasp the point that we can't reduce it to dollars and cents as such, but we have to approach it in a very, very, very sensible way. And I think that a few dollars earned in a safe environment or as safe as possible is better than seeking to earn many millions and you put a half of your population at risk. It is not going to worth it. So that's my response to the affordability question. It doesn't make sense to do that.
Airlift is another important aspect when you talk tourism. And that has been up and down, literally, actually, up and down, specifically in Grenada. I shouldn't say every week, but we often hear of planes reducing or airlines reducing their number of flights that coming into Grenada. Then the next week they increase it back to 3, then it goes back down to 1, sometimes none at all. And this fluctuation in the airlift industry, what sort of impact do you think it's having on us, on our economy?
Yes. Well, the airlift exists to service a demand, a purpose, and that is to say to bring people into Grenada. So we attract people and they book a Grenada vacation. The next thing is, how do I get here? And you need airlift to achieve that. Now, airlift doesn't come cheaply. There are significant costs associated with a flying program. Recently, there was a big item in the news in the region that Sanders had gone to meet with American Airlines. It was described as an unprecedented meeting, that a hotelier, a hotel company, would go to talk with a major airline supplier. Now, what is behind that? So we heard the announcement, right? We got the face value, the facelift of the thing, but we don't know what it is that they worked out. They would not publicize that. But I can tell you that if you think about it, Sanders didn't go there to say, to American, please bring your flights in. They went there to tie up the arrangements. And the tying up of those arrangements, it must involve financial contributions from the other party. So that's how you do it. If you have beds to fill, as in the case of Sandals or anybody else, you need the airlift to do so, to be able to do so. So when you see Sandals do that, you ask yourself, what is it that the destination, Grenada, can do or ought to do regarding airlift? Now, we have a situation of constraints. We have a small number of hotel rooms. We are under 2,000 rooms, 1,200 or so of which are, really good tradable rooms. Most of the rooms are in the 3-star, 3.5-star, 4-star range. Now, I'm making this point because in the airline stroke tourism business, the front, what is called the front of the aircraft, those seats with the club and first class seats, those seats pay for the flights. No. So the more 5-star property we have on Grenada, the better it is in terms of financing the flying programs. At this point, the majority of our seats, of our accommodation, are 3-star accommodations, and there are about people who are sitting in the back of the plane. So there are issues there. Now, so let's go further. If you are the government of Grenada, and you understand that tourism is so central to the economy and so on, it seems to me that we ought to be studying, meaning cause the technicians in the Ministry of Economic Development to study carefully what I would describe as the economics of tourism. No, because you see, there needs to be policy responses to position. It's not just rush into the market with some dollars. That would do some of the thing, but you need some other input. So we need, in my view, for our people here, the technical people, to work out arrangements behind the airlift supply. For example, what is the level of taxation on fuel used by airlines coming into Grenada? What's going on there? Yeah, because you see the cost of the seats tied up with that. It's tied up with the imposition of taxes by this government on every seat coming into Grenada. So I think in the circumstances where there is evidently fewer people at this point who are able to travel, the competition regionally and otherwise for the supply of those scarcer numbers of willing tourists is going to require that. How do you meet the competition? you have to put some incentives in the marketplace, and one of them, in my view, would be to make every effort to reduce costs. And reducing costs of the flying of the airline ticket and so on would be one of those contributions that I think the state ought to be considering. And there are other things, of course, the size of the marketing budget that is afforded, the GTA and other things like that. But so I just give you a scope regarding the airline thing, industry, and how it operates in a limited way, and how it impacts the status of in this case, our tourism industry.
The cost of flights in the region is also a concern, and I think it is hampering the tourism product of the region as a whole as well. Is there anything that can be done to reduce the cost of flights? To get to Barbados should not be more expensive than getting to the U.S. How can we fix that in our territories? Yeah.
Well, the common denominator in that thing is, let me put it this way. There are two components to the cost. One is the cost of the seats from the airline point of view, and the other is the level of taxation that governments have attached to each seat. So you have that. And in our case in this region, if you unpack the Liat cost, for example, on a ticket, you would find that upwards of 50% of that cost has to do with taxes and charges that are imposed by the authorities, by the airport authority, by the government of Grenada, and so on, for all kind of useful purposes. But at the end of the day, these things impact the level of costs. Having said that, and you haven't raised the issue of regional travel. Now, this is important for us because up to 2019, which is the base layer that we're going to use in the discussions, Caribbean tourism into Grenada represented almost a third of our arrivals. So you had the US with the volume leader, the UK, and then the Caribbean. So you're talking about significant numbers of Caribbean people who came here as tourists. Now, when you drill down from that top line, one of the things you find is that the majority of Caribbean people coming into Grenada did so for purposes of attending festivals and events. No, we can't have festivals in this period. Can we? You see, in the COVID context, the entertainment industry, right? Festivals and those kinds of events can't take place. So you see immediately the likelihood of tourist arrivals from the region, that is significantly depleted, which raises the question, therefore, if we're losing so much in the Caribbean, how do we compensate? Where else do we get the numbers to compensate from which markets for the fall-off in Caribbean supply of tourists into Grenada? And that is one of the reasons why when folks talk about, we're ready to run and take off and boom and so on, one has to ask what it is they're talking about. So let's get real. It's not going, it's not going to happen that way, all right? It's just not going to happen that way. So I'm going to ramble on a little bit on this because you see, if there's a need for us to incentivize travel to Grenada in this period, and there is a need, and there will be a need given the premises that we set up earlier, right? One of the things that one would expect is that the authorities will engage in promotional campaigns, right? But you see, campaigns are usually, marketing campaigns are usually either seasonal or they are purpose specific. Because remember, they are intended to target and stimulate demand for travel into your destination. So if you launch a campaign in March of this year, 2021, which the campaign is called Grenada Rocks. Grenada Rocks. So immediately, in my case, I am wondering, well, do they have this thing right? Who it is that you're targeting? And you're doing that at a time when there is virtually no airlift into Grenada. So what is it you're doing, right? I would anticipate that as recovery begins to take place, and in this case, in our case, if we're starting end of July, thereabouts, summer has gone, that's gone. It couldn't happen anyway because we don't have the festivals. And then we enter the hurricane season. The next season is, of course, the winter. And so I would expect a sensible campaign or two to be launched regarding travel for the winter. So let's look to see what they put in the marketplace, August, September, and so on, intending to stimulate traffic into Grenada. So you see, the thing is not a simple thing at all. Many parts have to work together to produce something beneficial for the people of Grenada.
You just mentioned the campaign Grenada Rocks, which takes me to the brand that we have been marketing regionally and internationally, the Pure Grenada brand. How does that play into plans to revitalize the tourism industry, encourage visitors to come in a time of a health pandemic when not much people can move, and now with the restrictions, not many people or not as much people can enter as we would have liked? How does the Pure Grenada brand play into the entire scenario?
That's a very important question. And I'm very sure I can't give you a full answer. But I'm going to make a couple of comments on that because you're touching the thing. Now, unfortunately, given what a pandemic is all about, we cannot say that Pure Grenada is synonymous with Safe Grenada. Yes, we can't say that. Because even though the numbers are low right now, in fact, those numbers could, and you had a couple of ministers making the point recently, and I agree with them, that in fact this thing could spring upon us very suddenly and we could have significant problems here. So, but moving beyond that, I would think that given the dislocation, given the disruption, that we really the COVID development ought to provide an opportunity for us to refresh the Grenada brand. Let us look at that to see whether it is valid as initially introduced, or whether we need to tweak it in some way or ways. So, for example, you launch the campaigns, your campaign must be consistent with the essence of your brand. You see, it must be consistent. So, my argument would be that we would have an opportunity to refresh the Pure Grenada brand. What do we still have that we could testify to, that we could take to the market in confidence? We still have great people. We still have great nature, meaning natural environment. We still have great stories to tell. And there is still great fun to be experienced in Grenada. So perhaps we might refresh the Pure Grenada brand along lines like that, bearing in mind that it just would not be true for us to claim, for example, that we've had this low level of the virus in Grenada, and therefore that is gives us some kind of marketing advantage. It does not, and it cannot, because we are so open, and the thing could hit us at any point. So that brand issue is something that the authorities might look at. It's not a question of changing the thing. It might be a question of refreshing it. It might be a question of repositioning it to some extent. I don't know. It's for them to do, right? I'm just thinking it through. Yeah. Okay.
On that note, Mr. Joseph, let's take a break and then we're going to come back and continue the discussion. Speaking with former Director of Tourism, William Joseph, the recovery of Grenada's tourism product in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. To the point, we'll be right back.
Hello everyone, I'm Godfrey Augustine. Culture is ever-changing and every nation has its own unique culture. And within a nation, the communities have their unique subcultures. Here in Grenada, it's no different. We have our unique culture and also our subcultures. But there is an emerging trend in Grenada that's happening. And you know, different behaviors and actions, if continued long enough and on a broad enough scale, can eventually become part of our culture. The emerging trend of weekend jab is quickly growing in Grenada. Should it continue? Or will it eventually become part of our culture or our weekend culture? Weekend jab. Join us this Friday on We Culture. Myself, together with scholar, Doc, and Risi, will look into the issue and the emerging trend of weekend jab. See you this Friday on We Culture.
Hey folks, you're invited to tune in to Grenada Music to the World program hosted by Eugene Gittens on Saturday mornings from 10 a.m. to 12 noon on Classic Radio 105.5, 105.9, Hot FM 98.5, 98.7, GBN TV and all their social media platforms. The only totally local music program in Grenada, representing all genres of music. So it's Green's Music to the World on Saturday mornings from 10 a.m. to 12 noon on GBN with the music icon himself, Mr. Eugene Gittens. See you then.
Stomp out careless or intentional bushfires, dead out. Youths, hunters, smokers, let's prevent bushfires. Here's why.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Point. Speaking with former Director of Tourism, William Joseph, the recovery of Grenada's tourism product, our tourism industry, especially in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Joseph, speak to me a little bit about the structure of Grenada's tourism product, the tourism industry, and the role that it plays really in what we market and sell to our regional and international potential visitors.
Yes, thanks again. Well, you know, we started off our tourism business in Grenada many years ago now as basically a sand, sea and sun destination. That was the whole thing. So it was general leisure. You want to come and relax on the beach and have this kind of thing. Over the years, we have become very much more sophisticated, I would say. And so the product offering is more diversified. So we could identify, for example, dive, and we call them market niches. So you have dive, you have weddings and honeymoons, you would have festivals, you have soft adventure, you have yachting. Right, those are the principal niches, as I recall, and in other words, that's where a lot of the money is being earned. right? A diver, for example, spends significantly more on a vacation than somebody who comes just to lie on the beach. Because you see, for obvious reasons. See, so it's big. Weddings and honeymoons are also good business, all right? And that is something that, as a romantic place and so on destination, we were beginning to get into stride, I think, in that area. Now, festivals in this context, well, principally on the mainland in Grenada, we're talking Carnival, and then on Caracou, we were talking the Maroon and String Band Festival, and we're talking about the regatta. So those are the primary festivals. I don't think that, if I left out any, you need to please remind me. But I think that those are the main festivals that we have been able to bring to the marketplace. And we've had considerable uptake, meaning people who've come to our destination, both on Grenada and on Caracou, to enjoy and participate in these festivals. So I think now that we are talking about these niches, I would look to dive as a niche that is very likely to resume at a faster level than, let us say, certainly than festivals, certainly ahead of soft adventure and so on. Wedding and honeymoon, well, that is a very intimate thing. Very, very intimate thing. And I don't know any couple who would want to come at the risk of, going back with something that would make them unhappy. But, that is just the reality of it. I could be wrong, but we need to look, this is a broader point I'm making, that a lot of the recovery is going to be had through these niches. Now, and as we raise the issue of recovery, I saw a report attributed to the Inter-American Development Bank recently, where they're saying that the studies on global tourism are showing that recovery is likely to take between 2 to 4 years. That is to say, to get back to the 2019 level, because remember, we were all dislodged in 2020. So the base year that makes sense would be 2019. And so to get back to 2019, they are reckoning that, listen, it could take destinations between 2 and 4 years. Now, in individual cases, it might leapfrog and take a little less. In some cases, it will take even longer. A lot depends on what the authorities do and don't do to aid the recovery. And on the product side, so I'm going back to your question. On the product side, we really ought to pay a lot of attention to the attractiveness of the product, the appeal of the product, right? In Grenada, we've talked about attractions. And for a very long time, we didn't make good sense of those so-called attractions. In other words, we did not develop them to a standard that enabled the visitor to have a particular branded experience at attraction X or attraction Y, and to spend more at the particular attraction and to take away memorabilia that is branded to the attraction, things like that. Now, they've done something, or they're doing something at Annandale, which I think is encouraging. It's fresh and so on. And I suppose it adds a new dimension to the Annandale experience. So that is to be welcomed and encouraged. We need to bring more life to other aspects of these attractions. I remember when I was at Manchester University, we took a ride over to Ireland. They took us to a place called the Burren. Big business, but you know what it is? It's rock. Rock exposed during the Ice Age. When the ice moved and eroded, or whatever the word is, all of the soil and left those rocks exposed, they have turned that into a major attraction. You see, so we need some ideas and some enterprise to bring life to these attractions in Grenada, so that in turn we could earn more, and we could deliver value for money to tourists who go. You take a taxi to go there, and when you get there, what's a letdown? A little thing, a little trinket thing, somebody dancing with some flowers and green fig on the head. What is it that we're doing? You see, so I'm not berating, the poor people and honest people who are doing that. I'm just saying that we need to do more, right? We need to do more than just those elementary things that we've done for 30 and 40 and 50 years. You see?
I agree.
So the product story, and the last point on this product thing has to do with this. Now, you would know, and we boasted about this for many a year, and Grenadians everywhere, I think, have been very proud to say this, that we are the warmest people, the most hospitable people in the Caribbean. And that is true. I say so myself as a Grenadian, right? But the COVID situation is given its nature, to my mind, has undermined that asset. In other words, the warmth that we are accustomed to delivering and sharing with the visitor, that warmth must now be delivered under a mask. Because we can't rush to folks and hug up them anymore and stand up in their presence and pose and take photograph, and we close the intimacy thing that they recognize in Grenadians and so on, and that we love to share with them. That, I think, we're going to have to rethink how we do that. And I think of school children, for example, the ease with which hitherto, a school child would go pose for a photograph with a tourist and so on. Now we are talking high-risk thing now. Can we do that? So what are we educating the local population to do in this period? You see, the thing has to be taken as a whole. If we prepare people who work in the industry, all right, to protect themselves and so on, but we do not message to the wider population, the host population, you and I and others, as to how to conduct ourselves in the context of our interaction with tourists, then you see where we're going to be left. So again, I'm pointing to an opportunity for internal marketing. We need to educate our people, right, in this new environment and so on, how the Grenada experience can be delivered as safely as possible. Recognizing that some adjustments are going to have to be made, obviously so. So there we are.
You brought up the topic of finding a niche, and that's a very valid point, especially now with trying to come back from COVID-19. A lot of our islands, and I can't remember exactly who said it, but the person said when it comes to countries in the Caribbean, each country needs to find where they set themselves apart, because everyone offers the same sea, sand, and sun. So what is it that makes Grenada the country that I want to go to? Why can't I get the same thing in Dominica? Show me what I can't get in Dominica. A lot of times when international people think of Caribbean vacations, the first country for most of them that comes to mind is Jamaica. And I follow a lot of celebrities, and that's where they vacation. You see them posting pictures and so of Jamaica. Why is it that Grenada can't seem to be the go-to location? What is it that we need? Why can't we find like a greater niche, a better niche, a bigger niche that people would say, let me go in Grenada, we'll get a down there?
Well, some of what you described tied up with cultural and historical realities. You take Jamaica, for example, which is in Caribbean terms an old and established tourism destination. Population size, investment opportunities, the size of the economy, the money power within the economy, the investment within the economy, and so on. And all of that get reflected in the kinds of tourism enterprises that they have set up. So the notoriety of Jamaica, the reggae music, the Blue Mountain coffee, and all of these things, they have successfully packaged those things, used those things, and of course, their dominance in international sport, athletics. You know, that Jamaica is not your typical Caribbean destination. So they have as many beaches as we have, right? So we don't have an advantage there. And they have much more than we have in so many different ways. They had a Jamaica. We've never had a Grenada, right? It's the home of sandals. Do we have a hotel chain that's owned by Grenadians? So there are issues of scale and so on and tied up in that reality. So for us, we are reasonably well diversified. And the evidence of that is in those niches that I drew your attention to. There was a point where we sought to establish ourselves as the dive capital of the Eastern Caribbean because we have so much some good quality dive assets. And so we put investment, and I believe they're continuing to do that, to promote the dive industry. What is required to be number one in dive in these parts? We have to answer that question. You see, a lot of these things, the vision question comes to the fore. And we have operated the tourism industry on autopilot for a very long time in Grenada. Remember, I made the point to you earlier about the need for the authorities to come to terms with the economics of tourism, seriously study this thing, and figure out where you're going. I'll give you a dramatic example of something. Some years ago, we were at a meeting of directors of tourism in the region. And one director said, we are producing oil, but this other country is selling fuel to airlines cheaper than we are. Do you understand what is involved there? This other country has done some homework. And they have recognized that, listen, instead of putting the tax on airline fuel that then raises the cost of the ticket into the country, we are not going to do that. We're not going to do that. We're going to zero that. You see how the thing begins to change right away. Cost is critical in the tourism industry. And therefore, you stimulate volumes and so on, and the state gets its revenue through the volumes, the higher volumes that come in. So we, I think, in Grenada need to spend some time to look at the economics of tourism. When we pick a niche, we need to decide where we want to go with it. Do we want to operate at a basic level and so on, a turn your hand kind of level? Or do we want to be a 5-star operation in a particular niche? If you're a romantic place, as we are in Grenada, and we pick wedding and honeymoons, we have to invest in that niche to give us the advantage that we need. Notoriety comes from that kind of commitment. See, so there's a lot of ground for us to cover. We don't have a reputation in reggae music or whichever. We have a reputation in jab. Some folks are not happy about it, but it is one of those things in terms of our culture now that we have successfully, in my view, how to call it, manipulated. It's not the correct word, but I use that word. To cause us to be different when it comes to carnivals in the region. I remember, we did promotion in Trinidad and Tobago. And we go about carnival, and you're promoting carnival in Grenada, you're going Trinidad. You can't talk about fancy mass because, I mean, you're out of place. We couldn't talk about steel band, we're out of place. So you know what I would have said? I used to tell them this when I go to Trinidad. I say, no, you are the greatest. And in this region, when it comes to steel band music, Grenada is second to you. You give them the credit. So at least they would recognize that, listen, I come to Grenada and so on, I love pan. I'm going to get some good pan. The standard would not be as high as mine, but we're going to get some good pan. And we won't get that pan in Barbados or in St. Lucia. We're getting Grenada. So my point is that in the tourism, in the carnival products, in the carnival offering, we have an opportunity, especially to the jab presentation and the jab soca beat, to make waves. And you see already there are other Caribbean nations that are taking this jab rhythm and are threatening to take it much further than we have. So you see. But what is going on there? We need our authorities, Government of Grenada, the Cultural Foundation, people who understand the entertainment industry, people with connections and so on with these things, to do the visioning. Do the visioning and then drill down from that so that we make the right investments and so on in order to get the benefit maximally of what the jab cultural presentation could offer our destination. So I've given you a long answer to your question.
But it's a good answer.
Well, thank you.
Let me see how many viewers and listeners we can accommodate in the next, 6 minutes? Let's go to the phone lines. Good morning, caller.
This is a recording.
Okay, we lost that caller. There's a question on the Facebook, Mr. Joseph. Somebody on Facebook says, more a comment. It puzzles me why we continue to pump millions into an industry that is relatively dead. Our import bill continues to climb, and yet we still don't see the need to diversify. The leaders of today are greedy and does not care about nation building and development.
So and so I'm expected to comment on that.
Yes, please, thanks. Do you agree?
Well, you know, it really is. I respect the view, but I do not think that it is a reasonable view. You see, some industry is going to have to spearhead the national economic development efforts. What is the basis for it? Your resource endowment, that's where you start. So if you are Grenada and agriculture has burnt out, we will never get the level of investment in agriculture to cause it to earn for us $500 million as tourism earned in 2019. When is that going to happen? The oil and gas thing we don't know about. Potentially, it could earn that, I suppose, but we don't know anything about it as such. They haven't told us anything yet. So my central point is, what is a national endowment base, right? And you know, we are having this level of investment in tourism plans because many investors see that is where Grenada as a destination has the potential to do well. Nobody's going to come in Grenada and invest X $100 million in a cocoa plantation. That's not going to happen anymore. The days for that are over. And in any event, let me just widen this thing, because sometimes it collapses into a discussion or an argument between tourism and agriculture. Listen, we don't need to position it as some kind of alternative thing or some kind of competition thing, right? If you have, as we do, tourism bringing in excess of the population size of Grenada annually, take this day over, 160-something thousand in 2019. That is more than the size of the domestic population. They must be fed. Yes, they are also fed with imported stuff, but there is a lot of fish that they consume. There are lots of fruit and vegetable that they consume that's grown here in Grenada. So you see immediately the link. And when you consider the potential for innovative products based on agriculture that could be sold in tourism, then you see where we're going. For example, all of this herbal craze and so on. And we have this natural environment, and some folks thankfully are producing now lemongrass and this grass and this bush. They're packaging it nicely and so on. And tourists are drinking it in hotels, and I'm drinking it too myself. Blossom, I hope you're drinking it. It's good stuff. Of
course. I have lemongrass in my yard.
That's where we're at.
Somebody, no, let me go to the landline. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, my dear lady, Mr. Williams. How is everybody? No, you have to open new sites in Grenada for tourism. New sites in Grenada have to be improved. New sites. Because the one they have for the past 100 years is just one way, one truck system they have all the years. So open new sites and then bring cable cars and things in all the highways, and bring cable cars and things. You have a cable car system running. You build new sites and things in the forest and things, a nice platform, a concrete structure with all entertainment and things in the area. Attract tourism. Now we have to end up the food and all attract the food. Attract Granatang, attract Lake Antoine, all them places need investment, big investment. But Greenland people have the money strong in the money in the bank, and they want to go forward. So long as we make a mind to invest and as Greenland people who have the idea, who want to come together and do things in the country, you win us one way. One truck man we have in this country, one truck we go in all the years.
All right.
Can we improve Greenland site for everybody, for tourism, for local? But you have to invest some money, get the things set up, plan Greenland in a good way. We know that means well plan Greenland. This is wrong plan Greenland. We have COVID-19. Plan Greenland better go forward for 100 days to come. We're educating Greenland,
Okay.
All the vision here you talk about a while ago, you was tourism minister for yourself for the past, and you didn't leave nothing place for people to go forward. But all the ideas when was there. But
thank you very much, caller. Mr. Joseph, more sites.
Yeah. So, he's raising an important set of issues there. Now, it takes us back to how we arrange ourselves to do our business. All right? It is so obvious to anybody that we need hotel rooms. It's a no-brainer. So a fellow with money, comes in and says, I am prepared to invest my money in hotel accommodation plan. There is a fiscal regime thing in place. They incentivize investment in hotel plant and so on, and they get tagged onto that, and whatever advantages they are, they go and enjoy those things. Now, the generation of business ideas for tourism purposes is something that we could assign to our technicians and professionals that are employed by the state or statutory bodies to do. So they have all it takes to do the research, what's trending in the world, what technology is needed, how much capital is needed, the skills level and so on, the training and all of those stuff. And they ought to be able to be set to work to design these things. Listen to me. You take art and craft and so on. Right? No. The vendors who are selling the spice basket and who've been doing so for 40 and 50 and 60 years are perhaps now at a point where there needs to be a shift from the traditional basket to something else. Utilizing a local product, of course, but perhaps with a different design. You see, who's going to do that? So I am a vendor, and my daughter has gone to the high school and she did physics and geometry and so on. Well, my God, she ought to be able to design a carrier for me to put my spices. And when that comes out, it ought to be an outstanding, as a standard, an outstanding a physical product, attractive and so on. So what am I saying? I'm saying that I believe that we have the talent in Grenada. We have the expertise in Grenada, but we need to bring people together and give them assignments to create, to generate, to conceptualize and design products so that the tourists could spend more when they come to Grenada. I don't know if it's zipline. I don't know. It could be. They have to do the work to study that. But there are other opportunities, right? My principal point is that we must sit down and get our people to study these things. There's a product development department at the Tourism Authority. They must do some of this kind of spade work if they're not yet doing it. And so that somebody, when you retire and you get your gratuity and you say, let me invest it in something, they ought to be able to say to you, here are 10 product ideas that you could take your $100,000 and begin an investment in the tourism industry. And that is how small people could begin to earn more from the tourism industry so that all is not creamed off by bigger investors in the hotel plant.
We are out of time, Mr. Joseph, but just wanted to get your final thoughts. What should be the next step as Grenada recovers tourismically? I'm making about that term this morning.
As we recover what? Sorry?
Tourismically. In tourism.
Well, the central thing is that we must continue to do what is right and sensible. It's basic. And that has to do with our health status. The vaccination program ought to be intensified, and people ought to, I would say, people should be shown, the advantages to themselves and to the society as a whole arising from a vaccination, an improved vaccination status. Then I think, as I've reiterated this morning, we need to approach our tourism business in a much more serious way so that we get more out of it. I don't think that we've done it sufficiently. And I think we ought to put an end to the fluff talk. We're hearing too much fluff talk, right? It's not about fluff talk. It's about setting goals that make sense and an agreement on how we get there. These are not issues of secret. Right, and then the last point I would say is that there's need for us to pay attention on the internal marketing side, so that the delivery of the Grenadian experience in the COVID period is addressed, and refresh that and so on, and look to see where we need to refresh the Pure Grenada brand if that is justified. So thanks a lot.
Appreciate your appearance here this morning, Mr. Joseph. Thank you so very much. Thank you for sharing your expertise on the tourism industry with us this morning. Hopefully, it brought a lot of information and clarity for some of our viewers and listeners, or all of our viewers and listeners.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Enjoy your weekend.
Remain blessed.
Thank you.
Great.
Former Director of Tourism of Grenada, Mr. William Joseph, we thank him so much for being our guest this morning. Thank you, viewers and listeners, for tuning in to The Point. This is the end of my time for today and the time for the week, actually. Joseph is up next with Mid-Morning Buzz. Have yourselves a safe and enjoyable weekend. I'll be back Monday morning, God willing. Have yourselves a good one.